In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Bryan Fry, Chad Robinson, Dustin Melbardis, Lizzy Haynes, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome, all you lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable, where we watch movies and then talk about them. I'm your host, Dustin Melbardis, and joining me today is my good friend and co-host, Lizzy Haynes. Lizzy, what are you getting up to in wintertime in Louisville?
Woohoo! We just celebrated Christmas. We're recording this a day after Christmas, so it's the Christmas hangover time. Everybody's coming down from the cookie high, and it's actually really warm and lovely here. It was like 50 degrees, so we're still same old, same old.
50 degrees?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Are you taking the kiddos ice skating?
No, I've tried taking my oldest roller skating, and it was an utter disaster. So I'm too afraid to take him out on ice. We're not ready.
It's one of those things that somehow, like, roller skating, rollerblading just seems street, urban, like skateboarding. Ice skating maybe it's movies make it seem more romantic or more like, I don't know what it is. There's something special about ice skating. Well, I guess not.
I agree with that. I do like ice skating. I think it's sweet.
I used to live up there. We'd go to the Cherokee Triangle to see all the old houses with the lights on.
Yes. It's like my favorite part of living here is looking at all of the beautiful lights and the beautiful neighborhoods. It's so much fun and the kids love it.
Well, I am a little bit of a Grinch, so I like staying at home. We aren't alone, though. We have a friend tonight coming to you from the Towel Capes podcast. It is our special guest, Cody Nester.
Hi, guys. Nice to be here. Appreciate you guys having me.
Very nice to meet you. You said you'd listened to a couple of our episodes before even getting in contact with us. With yours, I actually listened to your top 5 guilty pleasure movies. And I loved the show. I loved the sort of style of that episode. I'm not going to spoil your choices, but it's also a great length, like bite-sized episode, like 40 minutes.
Yeah, we try to keep it light. We know, people try to kind of their time to listen to podcasts kind of vary. So we shoot for 30 minutes for some of our supplementary kind of material. And we have our kind of main show. We go a little longer, hour and a half sometimes. We try to keep it short, try to respect people's time as much as possible.
I've got a question for you, Cody. What is your favorite or least favorite trend in superhero movies?
And I think it's oversaturation, which also kind of leads into the fact of not allowing creative people to be creative. Oversaturation we've seen over the last, I would say 5 years especially. Marvel is in its 10-year run. DC has had its issues over the last 10 years or so getting the DCEU off the ground. We just saw it end with Aquaman 2. And it's right now it's oversaturation, and it's the quality that we're getting in these films, and we're hiring people just to kind of hire them, not to let them kind of be creative and kind of mold these stories within a universe. We're bringing them on just as directors for hire, writers for hire, churn things out without kind of a creative outlet or creative drive behind them as much anymore. It's just kind of, hey, things you remember, let's bring this back. It's kind of lowest common denominator type entertainment right now, and I think that's what's the least successful films are kind of suffering from.
That's a great answer, and it'll drive people away. It drove me away. I couldn't keep up.
Yeah,
Same.
me and my co-host, we talk often about, there is superhero fatigue. There is a fatigue not only in the superhero genre, but, other genres like science fiction and things like that. When you look at the Star Wars franchise and these big major franchises that can't move away from the past into the future and create new and compelling narratives and stories for the audience of today. We're just too reliant on the past.
Yeah, that well thought out answer. It sounds like you've actually put some thought into that before. I wholeheartedly agree about oversaturation. But Lizzy, what's your favorite or least favorite trend in superhero movies right now?
So I have 2. They're both my favorites. I agree with everything that you just said, Cody. And to put a little bit of positivity, because I really had big superhero fatigue for a long time. Like I went years without rejecting all Marvel just because it was just too much. But I love, particularly in the old Batman movies with the running, like at the very end when, especially I think in Tim Burton's Batman's, where the very end, once they've defeated the bad guy, they start running and the brum, 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 like
Yes.
Batman music starts.
The
That's
silhouette
probably
of him running with the symbol in the back.
like, and then he starts running and then Robin is with him and Batman Forever. And then Batman and Robin has Batman, Robin, and Alicia Silverstone, Batgirl. I think my second would be that I want this to become a trend. So this is more kind of, I'm putting it out into the universe, hoping it happens, is that I really enjoyed the most recent Spider-Man movie. And without giving anything away, the reason why I enjoyed it was because it really was like a love letter to everybody that has ever enjoyed watching Spider-Man or the comics or anything like that growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope that they just keep that trend up, that they just try to honor the film rather than, and the storyline and the characters, rather than just trying to, like, to your point, Cody, just churn something in the mill for as much money as they can get. It's like, just really honor the fans.
There is something
absolutely.
about potentially taking creative risks, and I suppose that's okay, and you may ruffle some feathers. But yeah, anything that when you watch it, you can tell is like a love letter to the fans. I really dig that as well. I'm going to go with, this is a trend. It's kind of anti our current trend. This is just my thing, and it's been my thing since I was a teenager, is keep our stories on Earth. I don't exactly know
Like that.
why, but things matter to me when they're in Metropolis, or when they're in New York City with Spider-Man, or when they're in Gotham City. Once we go up to space, at that point, we've introduced so many variables and so many varying levels of power or powers that it's really hard to keep track of. If you're trying at all with your brain to think of like plausible stuff, once you get into space, it really changes stuff up. And that's the first step. Now, and I'm not hating on the new stuff. It's not like I've seen most of it, but now we are just so easily crossing into other dimensions. That's hard. That is hard to do. It was hard for the writers' rooms full of seasoned writers to do with the New 52, or with comic books back in the day. It's difficult to get it right, and I think some of these movies have gotten it right, but I just think it's difficult. And I would say that with what we're going to cover tonight, we might be dealing with this sort of nice little pocket in time where we weren't quite there yet. But Cody, I'm going to ask you, what's the last movie you saw?
The last movie I saw was another superhero film. It was Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom.
Nice. Did you like it?
I did not care for it. No, it suffers from some of the things that we're actually talking about right now, in terms of that, the oversaturation, and it suffers a lot from kind of just. They knew it was the last hurrah for the DCEU. The DCEU is ending. The DCU is coming within the next couple years with a rebooted Superman film from James Gunn, and it was just a lot of, I think, again, directionless. James Wan is the director of that film, and he's made some very interesting, very good films, but I think the writing let it down. And it's a visually appealing movie. It looks great, but the story and the kind of the heart isn't there. But that there are a little charming moments that it does have here and there, but overall, it didn't work for me as a whole.
It's so odd that we have a chance with a superstar like Jason Momoa and this franchise to have it be something that 16-year-old me would have gone gaga for, and I have zero interest. I think I saw a YouTube clip of him fighting Black Manta, and I'm like, that's cool. That's kind of all I need, though. 5 minutes worth of that world is kind of all I needed. And it's too bad that we talk more about the movie production of the DCEU, or add in however many letters as possible, than we do about the actual movies. It's really more about the Hollywood side more. Lizzy, what's the last movie that you saw?
Well, in honor of tonight's movie, I saw X-Men First Class.
That's
solid movie. I absolutely love it. I love seeing James McAvoy and is it Michael Fassbender? Is that? Yes. I love seeing them together as this awesome duo, and Jennifer Lawrence does an amazing job as Mystique. It is just a great prequel, and I loved every minute of it.
That was the first one that I didn't see in theaters, and I said, man, are we getting too much of this at a time? And when I got to it, I'm like, oh, this is as good as advertised. But
So good.
it was the beginning of my is this must see? Well, you're right. Fassbender and McAvoy on screen. Jennifer Lawrence's performance. Nicholas Hoult. There's a lot of good actors in that one.
That's one of those examples too of sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. There's one of the examples too of creative people being creative. Matthew Vaughn film. He's kind of made some of the more creative comic book films of the last kind of decade. And there's another example of kind of what we're talking about is letting people be creative and do what they do. And he kind of brought life back into that franchise that kind of got sucked away a little bit by bringing back all the old stuff to it later on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Is that there are not just visionaries, but there are people that we trust with these names. Then there are other people that just have a name unto themselves, and it's kind of a toss up now. With if there's gonna be 20 of these movies a year, then it's really like throwing darts at a dartboard. Which ones are gonna hit? Speaking of Nicholas Hoult, I watched a new movie, Lizzy. I watched a new movie. Well, it's only a year old, but that's rare for me, listeners. I watched The Menu from 2022.
That is an awesome movie.
It immediately broke my top 20 movies all time.
What? That's awesome.
One of the best movies I've ever seen.
It's so good.
My jaw was on the floor, and I'll give it a blanket recommendation for all who have not seen it. And if you have seen it, watch it again. Gosh, what a trip! I loved that one.
It's really, really fun. And there's a lot of really fun conspiracies about the ending. I can't say a thing because it's just one of those movies you really should go into but with a clear slate. But watch the movie, anyone listening that hasn't already seen it, or if you want to rewatch it, watch it and then get on a Reddit thread about the ending. It's really funny. It's fun to play around with theories on that one.
Now, we are actually covering something that upon watching, it made me get on Reddit and do a lot of reading on my own. Lizzy, what are we covering tonight?
We are doing the X-Men sequel X2, X-Men United.
Starring Patrick Stewart, Hugh Jackman, Ian McKellen, Halle Berry, Famke Janssen, James Marsden, Rebecca Romijn-Stamos, Bryan Cox, Alan Cumming, Bruce Davison, and Anna Paquin. Star-studded cast. A budget of $110 million, and it grossed $214 million. Placed 6th in the box office, right behind Bruce Almighty and right ahead of Elf. Number 1 movie that year was Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. X2 has an IMDb rating of 7.4. The critics and the audience are aligned here, both at 85% fresh. Now, Cody, you presented this. Had you seen it before?
I had. It has been it's been a while since I've seen it, but I had seen it. I saw it back in the day once it actually released in theaters. I've seen it a few times in the kind of intervening years there, but definitely something I've seen and kind of come back to a few times over the years. Hadn't seen it in probably 1 or 2 years since I've revisited it, but it's definitely something that's it's in my watch list from time to time.
It deserves to be. Lizzy, what about you? Had you seen it before?
Yes, I saw it in theaters when it first came out. This was probably towards the peak of my obsession with superhero movies. This is really when Marvel was getting its legs in a really big way. And I loved this movie, but it had been probably 10 years since I had seen this movie. When I started watching it again, I watched it with my husband, Aaron. We had said, I feel like for some reason, I remember this being my absolute favorite movie before it even started. And by the time it was over, we're like, I remember why this was my absolute favorite movie. I could hardly remember the plot. And then it was like riding a bike. That sensory memory just came like right back of, I remember everything about this movie now that I'm about 5 minutes in. And it was just as good as when I first saw it.
And it had been 10 or 15 years since I had seen it before. I saw it in theaters too. I was a sophomore in high school. I went to go see it with my nerdy friends, and I don't think I'd seen it since college. I remembered the things I liked about it. I remembered thinking that these early Spider-Man movies and early X-Men movies were good, and my expectation this time was to be reminded of brilliance, because a little 16-year-old Dustin was thinking, like, this was incredible. Did you have any different expectations this time, Cody?
Coming back to it, my expectations were I figured it was going to drop a little bit in my nostalgia goggles a little bit, if you would. At the time that I saw it when it was first released back in '03, this, like you said, this was the very early days of Marvel. This film, the first 2 Spider-Man films, and something that's very underrated in putting Marvel on the map back in the day. The Blade film with Wesley Snipes was pivotal. It was really one of the first Marvel films that put them on the map. But this is something that it in nostalgia kind of says it's a little bit better in my mind. It was probably back then it probably would have got a 9 or 10 because there was just so little of the content. And as you say before, some of the awards the genre didn't get credited like it does today. It was looked at a novelty. It was looked at something it was a fad. You couldn't pull these things off. They were hard to film. They cost too much to make. It wasn't kind of given the wealth and kind of looked at the way it is today, but it's something that definitely I think still holds up pretty solidly, as we'll talk about.
Yeah, I would agree in that we didn't look at superhero movies the same way. They certainly were not the billion-dollar cash drivers like they've become. But there's this, talking about it holding up. I'm not even certain if our time frame, like 2003, I think it's kind of mercurial as to when this could be. There's nothing that stands out as particularly dated, I would say, but potentially some wardrobe stuff. But I really do think it holds up. I will enjoy this movie when it comes across. Even just thinking about it, I will enjoy it again and again. Lizzy, did you have the same feeling about it holding up? You said this was right at the peak of your Marvel fandom.
Yes, I really do. I love all of the characters so much. I mean, you already listed it's like such a star-studded cast, and I have so much fun, especially after also continuing to watch on and watching First Class. It only almost richens my appreciation for this movie because, in X-Men First Class, you learn about the relationship between Magneto and Professor X. And so watching X2 back, kind of knowing that information, you just see this like kinship, like they really do have this like love and respect for each other. And in the first movie, they appear to be mortal enemies. And so in this particular movie, to have that stage set and to see everybody come together and team up is just so much fun. And you get to see these characters that were previously fighting really come together. And I don't know, it just feels like such epic payoff for me after. And of course, I know covering this movie, you almost want to let it stand on its own and not compare it to its predecessors or movies that have come before. But I just think this movie really stands on its own. Like, it's just a really, really awesome movie. You could almost just have a quick blurb of the events that had transpired before without even needing an original movie and just let this be the movie. And then it just ends and there doesn't need to be anything after. Like, it really feels like it stands on its own 2 feet.
That was something coming in this time that I was thinking to myself, is it even possible for me to view this as if I knew nothing about the X-Men? That's tough to think about. You have to turn things off in your brain. And eventually I quit with that exercise and just let myself enjoy it, let it wash over me. And we're going to talk more about this movie, but we're going to take a quick break. After we come back from this break, Lizzy's going to give a plot summary. So if you have not watched X2, then you need to go and watch it. Turn us off. Come back because we're going to talk about this movie. See you on the other side.
Welcome to the All 80s Movies Podcast.
I'm Bill.
And I'm Jason. And this is the podcast where we talk about the blockbusters, the flops, and everything in between from one of the freshest decades for movies, the 1980s. So whether you're a brain, a jock, a valley girl, or a Jedi, we've got some 80s classics for you.
Do these movies stand the test of time? Are we discovering something new? Is there an 80s movie we're finally watching for the first time?
Join us each week as we dive into the cinematic nostalgia that inspired and influenced a generation. From the hits to the cult classics, we'll discuss our earliest memories, favorite scenes, fun facts, and our not-so-favorite movie moments, too.
It's the All 80s Movies Podcast, now available on all major streaming platforms. Please subscribe and happy listening.
All right, and this is now your last warning, because we're about to give a plot summary for X2. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it. But for now, Lizzy, take it away.
After the events at Liberty Island, a mutant attack is made on the president, and now a line has been drawn in the sand. Agent Stryker, a head military expert on mutants, is brought in to propose next steps, making it clear that he is ready for a war against the mutants. After he learns about Professor X's school and the tool Cerebro inside, Stryker visits Magneto in all his plastic prison and injects him with a cognitive serum, allowing him to control Magneto and extract information regarding Cerebro and its whereabouts. If Stryker is able to get a hold of it, he can locate every mutant on the planet and wipe out the mutant race. After infiltrating the school, Logan and his students are forced to flee and eventually run into Magneto, who has escaped his holdings with the help of his loyal henchwoman Mystique. They learn Stryker's plan on the attack of the president and his plans for the mutant race. Together, Magneto and the X-Men team up together to take down Stryker. Logan, whose feelings for Jean are only becoming stronger, knows that by fighting Stryker, he will inevitably learn more answers about his past to which he has been pining. The team arrives at Stryker's disclosed location, and a final battle ensues. Professor X is manipulated into using Cerebro by Stryker and his son into finding and killing mutants, while Logan happens upon the room in which his adamantium form was created, and Scott and Storm are manipulated by Stryker once again in trying to fight Jean. Luckily, Scott comes to just in time, revealing that he could see himself hurting her, but had no control under Stryker's control. Nightcrawler, the same mutant that attacked the president under Stryker's manipulation, saves the professor from hurting both mutant and humans alike, and Stryker is detained, left for dead. Upon liftoff of the base to head home, a nearby dam is about to break, releasing enough water to swallow their ship. In order to lift off, Jean jumps overboard, lifts the ship just in time to let the jet get airborne, but not before she herself is submerged in the waters. Scott and Logan mourn their beloved as Professor X freezes a live statement from the president, kindly letting him know that mutants are not going anywhere. Our final scene ends with the waters over the lake where Jean met her demise to reveal a phoenix rising from below.
This movie has everything. Teenage angst, adult feelings, anomie, fear of being different, fear of the unknown, hidden secrets, romantic love, steaminess, seductiveness, right versus wrong, independence versus utilitarianism, institutional change, espionage, manipulation, a race against the clock, loss, death, taboo targets from the military, and somehow in this superhero world, an actual realistic doomsday. Just cram-packed with all of this stuff. Great recap, by the way. Cody, I want to start with you. We've got our X-Men. What's our level of excitement for fans of this series coming into X2?
Yeah, I think X-Men, the original film in 2000. I think again it helped launch Marvel and launch their properties with Fox, and it really did generate a lot of excitement. It was well received at the time. Going into X2, I think everyone kind of wanted to see more of that ensemble.
Yeah,
Obviously,
more.
Hugh Jackman's Wolverine is a standout here. He was the big standout of the first film. I think everybody kind of wanted a little bit more of the same. They wanted that ensemble. They wanted to see their favorite X-Men up on screen doing the things that they'd read and done before in the comics. And I think for the most part, I think you get a decent amount of that here. And like I said, it just kind of builds a little bit throughout the film. It is a kind of a film that is a little bit Wolverine centric, and the ensemble does suffer just a little bit here compared to the first one. But overall, like I said, excitement couldn't have been higher when this film hit in 2003.
Yeah, I agree with the Wolverine centricity. Now it is kind of a big star leading that, and then you had mentioned with the DCEU before that there's something about when these actors sign long deals. For instance, our first movie was pretty rogue centric with X-Men. Check out episode 31 of the Retro Movie Roundtable if you want to talk about that movie. But yeah, excitement is high. I felt the same way. As a guy who was a fan of these characters, fan enough to have learned from comic books and then printed like hardcover or paperback books about the characters I liked. This was, we can't say it's pre-internet, but it's certainly pre-smartphone, to where you'd have to find special encyclopedias or special media to learn more about your favorite X-Men, for instance. Now, Lizzy, aside from the first X-Men movie, were you bringing that same kind of excitement in for this?
I was so excited. Today, in today's world, I think because of all of the things that you had previously mentioned, Cody, that like kind of fatigue, I think that I'll go into a sequel with somewhat low expectations
Mm.
and just kind of be like, I'm seeing it because I love it, but I'm going in with the expectation that I'm probably going to be somewhat disappointed. I think that with this particular movie, again, I felt like we were really seeing Marvel get its legs. So I was still kind of new to the superhero game. So for me, I went in with like the highest of high expectations of being like, I loved the first one. There's just no reason why I won't like the second one. I loved seeing all of the characters on the screen. And I went in fully expecting to love it. And I left, with my expectations honestly exceeded because I prefer this movie. In the original trilogy, this is leaps and bounds my favorite.
And we've got a large cast, and we've got a large ensemble. I would agree with Cody that our Wolverine character, who has the most movies sort of under his belt devoted to his story, it has become, if he wasn't already, such a huge fan favorite. And we have certain stories. It might be hard to get any character development. It might be difficult. But along with development, we also need character conflict. And we're not talking about the war between two factions, but just characters that very plainly shown to us on screen who are battling, whether that's socially or just or emotionally. Give me something from this movie, or expand however you'd like, Cody, on those kind of conflicts or developments that really help this bloom more than just an action fest with superpowers.
In the first film, it was very much an X-Men versus Brotherhood. That's kind of the Brotherhood of Mutants. That was kind of the big foil, the probably the biggest foil to the X-Men and the original run and through the years. And this, you kind of move it in from like I said, less ensemble driven to a more personal story, especially to Wolverine. The conflict here is centered around his time in the Weapon X program. Coming from the first film, he is still very much looking to figure out who he is. He doesn't know his real identity. He knows bits and pieces about what happened to him post the Weapon X program, but not too much about who he was and what his life was before he went into Weapon X and was kind of fused with this adamantium kind of body and skeleton that he has.
Mm-hmm.
And in this, it's a much more personal story between him and William Stryker, who's kind of the overseer of that Weapon X program, who's kind of his creator and also kind of a little bit of a in a strange way, kind of a father figure, the only father figure he had known um, previously, until he kind of gets under the wing of Charles Xavier, who kind of takes him and is kind of leading him along to his own epiphanies. He could easily go in and he could tell Logan everything about himself, but there's parts in the film where he tells Logan, that's not how the mind works. It's better to discover these things and discover who you are
Yeah.
along the way, instead of just kind of being fed it by Professor Xavier, really. And that's kind of where your conflict comes from, is the personal story about Wolverine, and also some of the other characters that do get the development here, like a Jean Grey. She's starting to have a little bit of those, what I'll call Phoenix fits. Which is her,
I like that.
Phoenix fits. Yeah, she's starting to kind of see that we're kind of starting to learn that Jean Grey has some things going under the surface that we hadn't really previously known about from the prior film, and that kind of she gets a lot of development here, especially towards the final act of the film as well.
Yeah, and we are shown in a way we know that this Logan Wolverine character is loner, tougher than nails. And so getting a chance to see him connect with Charles Xavier. And then we also get some instances where he's connecting with William Stryker. I think the one that stood out to me was in the hallway when they are talking during the raid on the school. Stryker gets to talk to Logan. Do you feel like this connection is something that, like, oh, it's almost going against type here, Lizzy? Like, we get to see, I think it's more than just tell me what happened back in the day. Like, there's a longing for something there.
The one thing that I will say that Stryker has going for him is he is as far as characters in this movie goes, he's kind of as wicked as it gets. Like, he's really dark. He doesn't care who needs to plow through to get things done. but he's able to do it in a way that has the way that he speaks to you is so calming, and he has this snake-like charm almost that he is able to use on Logan, and you can very much tell that there is a subconscious tether there that Logan has. And so the way that he speaks to him, he's on one hand, I think, playing with Logan because he recognizes that Logan doesn't 100% remember. And then I think on the other side, there's probably this side of him that also feels like Frankenstein's, he's Frankenstein's monster almost, where he's, he recognizes like, you're my creature, I've created you. And so they have this bond that even though they're enemies, that it's below the surface and you can tell that it's there. So it's definitely a little bit of a departure from this just very clean cut, I'm the good guy and you're the enemy. And it's pretty delicious to watch how it unfolds.
I have to preface this, which I think X-Men does a great job of getting the X-Men universe version of the U.S. government involved in public perception of mutants. And we could go, I would bet that with the three brains here, we could go for an hour on just this sort of us versus them of, human beings, Homo sapiens versus mutants. But we can't do that for this whole show. But they did a great job with the Senator Kelly in the first X-Men movie. And then in in X2, we have William Stryker works within the U.S. government. And he stages this assassination. It should have been successful. It wasn't. Both fall within the sort of game plan of our William Stryker. Lizzy, you said, like, God, the most wicked that you can be. At first, you thought a war on mutants. But gosh, he starts this war with the ultimate key to destruction. How do you view this enemy for X2?
Well, to start off, kind of going to Lizzy's point, Brian Cox does an amazing job here as William Stryker. Obviously, a very talented actor. Some of his performance, maybe you could maybe even argue kind of channeling some of his previous experience playing Hannibal Lecter in Michael Mann's Manhunter, the first on-screen version of Hannibal Lecter.
That's
kind
right.
of channeling that a little bit. But overall, his plan here, I think, is pretty solid. There have been people that have kind of looked into it and nitpicked it just a little bit in terms of the final kind of scene. So the overall setup here is basically William Stryker has a son, Jason Stryker, who was suffering from severe mental illness because he has a power set that is very similar to Charles Xavier himself. He's a telepath, kind of a mutant that has those kind of same power sets. And Stryker kind of has a personal agenda against not only mutants, and he has a personal agenda against Xavier because he entrusted Jason, his son, to Xavier to I think in William's mind to cure
to
him,
fix him,
cure him of his mutation, which he looks at it as a disease. Xavier obviously looks at it as another evolution of humanity. Homo superior, I think, is a term coined by Magneto, and that's kind of your narrative thrust here. As far as the plan goes, I mean, his plan is basically to use Charles Xavier to form. He executes an invasion, an intrusion into the Xavier mansion to steal parts from Cerebro to kind of form this kind of dark Cerebro so that he can use Jason to force Charles to find all the mutants on the planet and to kind of
one fell
erase
swoop
them from the planet.
Yeah,
to get rid of everybody. And if you look at the kind of the last scenes, it's really, I think the kind of the nitpick there as well. If Charles is doing this to all mutants, wouldn't Jason be affected? Wouldn't himself be affected? I think in the novelization of this film, it's kind of explained that he took that into consideration. The toll that it would take on Jason to force Charles would kill him, and the toll it would take on Charles to destroy all the mutants, to kill all the mutants on the planet, would take enough toll on him that it would kind of be a mutually assured destruction, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really gone into too much in the film like that, and I don't think you need to. I think if you look at it overall, it's pretty solid. But if you dig down into it and say, well, there are two mutants, why is it not affected by Charles's powers? You look at it as it's a mutually assured destruction type situation.
I love that this world, it's different than other superhero worlds. We've got a population of mutants. I think that's wonderful, is that you have different versions of different, we'll call them power levels. We know X-Men certainly calls them power levels. They rank them by class. And then there's also like Omega level. That's all, nitty gritty inside baseball. But we have all of these different types of characters. You have very powerful superheroes and supervillains. Then we have William Stryker's son. And you're right. He sent him to Charles Xavier to try to fix him, try to cure him. And his ability is twofold. Well, we can call it twofold. He can create illusions within the mind. And through creating illusions within the mind, he can get you to do what he wants. It's terrifying if you take a scope back. It's when you think about Jason Stryker's character. And I know that this is a departure from who Jason Stryker is in the comics. But look at that character, absolutely terrifying. And they are extracting a fluid from his brain. And that is what they are seeping onto the backs of the necks of our Nightcrawler, of our Magneto, of our Lady Deathstrike, and a couple others throughout the film. And I gotta say, it wasn't until this watch through that they tell you, I just wasn't paying attention before, guys. They tell you, like, oh yeah, his brain secretes this, and this is how we're able to do it. So you have one unique mutant. And this is how so many great X-Men storylines are, is there's something about this mutant that is unique. And then you have something about the person who's unique. And I think that this opens so much about the X-Men universe, is that it's not necessarily about the power. Is you spend more time with them and you learn it's about like who they are. Now, we don't get much personality from Jason Stryker, but just one wheelchair user who has sort of mind control powers is extremely terrifying. You've got a henchwoman. But Lizzy, I bring all this up because we have a big cast. Who is it that is special in our main cast? Or who is it special that's sort of on the side that you're like, oh, look, this kid doesn't go to sleep and he changes the channels with his eye. I think this movie gives us a lot of chance to see like who these people are.
Yes, absolutely. The two characters that stand out the most for me, they weren't my favorite when I first saw the movie, but now that I'm much older and I can appreciate just kind of the complexities, as you said, of just the human experience, and because that plays so much of a role, to your point. I'm a big Magneto girly. I love him so much. I find him to be so interesting. You look at the juxtaposition between him and Charles. They're both very strong, but arguably I would say Charles is stronger in terms of his ability. The fact that he can quite literally implant thoughts into your mind. I mean, Magneto, the only reason why he wears that helmet really is to protect him from Charles. Like, he recognizes Charles's power. But Charles is someone who truly wants to live in harmony with humans. Like, he wants to be able to live side by side. And whereas Eric, as we learn in the first movie, he is a Holocaust survivor. And so almost everything that he does and every single move that he makes is to maintain his personal autonomy. And so the idea that humans are afraid of mutants and want to create any kind of separation in any way, shape, or form, like, that really speaks to the fear of what he's experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And so almost every single thing that he does is really just in motivation to make sure he is always in control of his actions and his freedom and his ability to live. And that, of course, drives him to eventually kind of be a bad guy. But I love him. I find him so refined and polite, while also just kind of being wicked and a bad guy. And I find he's so complicated, and he's so much fun to watch because of that. You never quite know what he's going to do. And for those reasons, it makes it so much fun. And then I love, just like as a quip, I love Nightcrawler. I think he's so sweet. Again, another juxtaposition. He's kind of like devilish, but yet he's a very strong Christian. And, you catch him in a church and just some of the lines that he has. And I love one of my favorite relationships is the one that he has with Storm, the way that they talk and share stories and just overviews of life. He is very wise little mutant. I love him.
Cody, are you a Magneto girly too?
I do enjoy Magneto. I do enjoy the character. I'm glad to kind of see in this film because obviously he's the main foil with the Brotherhood in the first film. I'm glad to see. At first, you're kind of worried, is he going to be relegated to his plastic cell for most of the movie? Because that's a problem in a way that some of these films have. If you look at the X-Men films, they always have to find a way to take Charles Xavier off the board.
Yeah.
Because Charles Xavier is an Omega level mutant, and he can pretty much, if he's left to his own devices, he can solve a lot of these problems narratively for a writer. So as a writer, you have to kind of take Charles Xavier off the board.
Yes.
And they do that in the majority of the X-Men films. And you kind of worry that they're going to do that with Magneto a little bit and kind of leave him in his plastic prison. But it's good to see that he kind of gets to kind of come out and play a little bit towards our final act of the film. But I do enjoy Magneto. There's some other mutants here too that I wish had some more, were brought into this series a little earlier. You kind of mentioned there's some new characters in the background. The kid that can change the channel with his powers. There's a girl that kind of could be a Kitty Pryde type character that you see kind of running through the walls during the invasion of the mansion. The big one here that I wish got a roster spot earlier on in this film series was Colossus. You kind of see him kind of herding the kids throughout the mansion to try to get them through the tunnels into safety. Unfortunately, he's kind of not really spotlighted except for those one kind of little scenes here. Unfortunately, he's even credited by the wrong name, his character's wrong name in the credits. His name is Peter Rasputin. He's credited as Peter Raputin in the credits, unfortunately. So they didn't even give him service enough to get his name right in the credits. But I think those are some of the things I would have liked to see a Colossus get a roster spot over somebody like a Pyro. Whose character basically in this film is, I'm Pyro, thus I must flick a lighter. That's kind of his character in this
audibly
film.
Annoying. Audibly annoying. I got to tell you, Cody, Colossus is my favorite X-Men. Has always been. It started because the arcade cabinet at the arcade, the X-Men side-scrolling game. Who do you want to be? I wanted to be Colossus. So I know everything about his character. And he gets 10 seconds. Sorry. He gets 3 seconds in his metal form, and you don't even see him beat the guys up. They just get thrown through a wall. Then he's leading the kids out of, into safety. He says to Wolverine, I can help you. Wolverine says back to him, no, you help them. Little bit of okay, is he being a leader? Is Wolverine actually looking out for someone else besides himself? 5 minutes later, he has Rogue, Iceman, and Pyro go out, and he doesn't follow them, and he almost doesn't take his own advice. He's like, no, you guys will be fine. I'm gonna let my self-interest come in here. I gotta say, the thing about Pyro here, his inclusion, which I love, is he doesn't have to be a jerk. They make him a jerk, and it's okay for the jerk to join the Brotherhood at the end, we'll say. But it would be okay if he wasn't either. It would be okay if he was just, I've been given 2 options, and I'm going to choose the one that lets me not be, what does he say? Enough at the kids' table. I want to go live my life. And the idea that just by listening to another adult, I'm a Magneto girly too. Just by listening to them, he's like, oh, that's kind of the world out there. I think Magneto says, you're a god among ants, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We're God among insects.
That's
Never let anyone tell you any differently.
Then we get that scene where we're not going to say loses his cool. I guess you're supposed to be shown that he's got this within him. He said after Logan takes one in the head from the Boston cop, surprise, surprise, he flicks his lighter. You know those stories you hear about the bad mutants. I'm the worst one. And he starts to lay waste. Now, do I want more Colossus? Absolutely. Speaking of things that I want more, I'll wait until I change one thing. But they left some stuff on the cutting room floor here, which just hurts my heart. Luckily, there's been so much X-Men content since then. Not all of it good, but we've had so much since then that we do get our taste of that way, way, way later. But yeah, our human stories here are so much to take in, and there's a lot. Lizzy, I want to come back to what you said about Storm and Nightcrawler.
Yes.
Now, I do not remember much about Nightcrawler's backstory aside from the circus. I don't remember if there was anything that was explicitly, whether it's devout, whether it is, what is the word I'm looking, Orthodox Christianity, where he's from. I don't remember that. I remember his character being a little playful, kind of devilish, but kind of playful. What a coup to have that be an important part of his character.
Right. Yeah, it's so fun. You really don't expect it. I think even when he's afraid, I looked up in the trivia that he's yelling at them in German, and I'm not going to try to repeat it, but it translates to him saying that he's an agent of the devil. So like he's afraid of Storm and Jean, thinking that originally when they come into the church that they're there to hurt him, and so he tries to use his appearance to, to scare them off. And then, very, very quickly you realize that his outward appearance is absolutely nothing it's the exact opposite of, the heart that he carries. And he, you feel really bad for him. And I really forgot all about that when I watched it, that he was manipulated into the attack on the president. I had, for some reason, just completely wiped that from my mind. And so in watching it, I was like, wait, I'm confused as to like, you're the good guy now. And then he turns his head and you see the little, almost looks like a burn mark.
It does. Yeah.
And in the back of his neck. But I love his personality, and he's so calming and sweet and wise. When everybody's panicking, he's praying. And I think he's somebody that you want on your side, because he's somebody that's able to stay cool and calm under pressure and kind of keep that kind of compass of what really matters, kind of always keeping north.
And how thankful are we that it gives Storm something to do, Cody?
Right. I know she really wouldn't have much of a plot if it weren't for him, because Jean is, at this point, she's off with Logan, and they're kind of doing their thing. And so it really does give Storm and some Halle Berry some screen time.
That's that right there. I'm glad you kind of hit on that point. As far as cast goes, Halle Berry, talented actress, Academy Award winning actress. There's been a lot of great roles. She is the biggest miscast amongst this pretty much great cast, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
She is from the very first film. She just never really fit that role to me. I think it was an example of, we need a big star here to sell our film, which I get from a production standpoint and a making money standpoint. But as far as actually cast as Storm and portraying a good Storm on film, she doesn't get it for me. But
actually, I agree with you. I really do agree. I think she's too soft spoken. I really think that I used to watch the the cartoon, and Storm was just this like powerhouse of a person who really, she brought the storm, and so she was very outspoken and loud and abrasive, and she just kind of wouldn't roll over and play dead for anybody kind of character. And Halle Berry's Halle Berry. She's a fantastic actress, but she's just very mousy in this role, and I felt that it didn't fit either.
Yes, what a characterization. And this is the only one of these original three where she gets to do anything. And when I say gets to do anything, yeah, she blows stuff up with lightning. Yeah. But like, as far as, hey, what are we here for? Talking about like character development, conflict, relationships. It's so needed here. Now, this is, I think, our example. Now, we have our interpersonal relationships, and then we have our Brotherhood of Mutant versus X-Men. Then we have mutants versus William Stryker's group. And in reality, we get to, I think, the scene with Bobby Drake's family is, you could cut and paste that into, if instead of Bobby Drake being a mutant, you could cut and paste it into Bobby Drake being gay. And
yes.
At this point, the way the mom is talking about, have you tried not being a mutant? It's not, we still love you. All of this stuff, it's so very clear in one scene. And yeah, we are getting the benefit of X1, of X-Men 1, and we're getting the benefit of in-world media things that are happening. But X-Men, Cody, what do you think about this? Does X-Men do the greatest version of us versus them, normies versus superheroes in all of our comic worldscape?
I think so, yeah, and going back to that scene you mentioned with Bobby and his parents as
Yeah.
well, something I was kind of looking into the research when I was going through this film. Ian McKellen obviously plays Magneto, openly gay
Mm-hmm.
actor in Hollywood. From what my research, he actually went and actually kind of worked with the production team and the writers to kind of write that scene
Wow.
as more of a coming out type of scene
Mm-hmm.
for Bobby and for that moment. So definitely something that kind of wanted to mention there. But as far as X-Men, I think yes, it's been around for a very very long time. At this point, it was relevant in its time. It kind of mirrored things going on in society at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, it still mirrors things going on in society today. It's a universal story that resonates with people feeling like an outcast, feeling like you don't belong, finding a place that you can belong, being protected by that family, your new family that may protect you and love you in a way that your actual family never could. All universal story, potential here, and resonates with everyone still today. I think you're right. I think it is still holds up as kind of like one of those best kind of narrative driven kind of background pieces that you think about. Is this is human versus mutant, Homo sapien versus Homo superior, and the toll that takes on every person that is a mutant or otherwise.
I think the father says, like, well, we thought he was going to a school for gifted students. And Rogue says that he is gifted.
Gifted. Yeah.
Now, he follows it up with the lamest use of his power, which is to turn her hot tea cold. Fine. But
he pulls down the Wolverine's Dr. Pepper as well. Don't forget that.
That was awesome. That I really liked. That I really liked. But Professor of Art Logan. So we have that, but it's awesome that the movie really shows it, like, being different and being exceptional, not quite the Homo superior, the way that Magneto thinks. Because we know Magneto's endgame here. Gosh, the minute he gets inside Cerebro and changes what's going to happen.
Yes.
Find all the humans. Kill all the humans. Wow. So you can't even really call it a twist. We know what Magneto's about, but the stakes are very high for the last 45 minutes of this movie. It's awesome. I think I hold the movie in pretty high esteem, but there's a lot of crunchiness of stuff to dig into here. Let's go to we have our two big guys, Omega level mutants. So is Jean Grey, so is Iceman, so is Storm. But we've got these two guys. You're right, Cody. You got to take Professor X off the table. You have to, and then have Magneto sidelined for a little bit. What a way to get out! By the way, an incredible way to get out.
The coolest escape ever.
Yes, and a huge smile on Ian McKellen's face as he's doing it. I would say Ian McKellen transformed Magneto more so than any actor has ever transformed a character. More so than Hugh Jackman to Wolverine. I'd say, like, the personality that Ian McKellen can bring into the Magneto character is really something big. It's like the unfair advantage that a Robin Williams would have if you cast him as a known character, bringing that up. He does a great job there. But then we've got our hints about Logan's background, our hints about this, and then we have Lady Deathstrike, the henchwoman, we'll call her. I liked that she was in it, but I don't know if she got a chance to develop as much as the rest. Lizzy, would you say that she's potentially a little flatter than the rest?
Yeah, I think, the only real, they try to foreshadow that they're going to do a reveal that she's a mutant during the Stryker's meeting with the president. She's cracking her knuckles a lot. And of course, Stryker, because in the very beginning, upon meeting him, his stance is he absolutely just hates mutants. So you wouldn't think that he would surround himself with mutants in any capacity. But of course, when she's cracking her knuckles, you're thinking, okay, she's a mutant, and he either knows and they're in cahoots with each other, or he has no idea and he's about to find out in some big way towards the end of the movie. And then they kind of surprise you a little bit towards the end of the movie when they do make the reveal that she is a mutant. It's less surprising because now we understand that he's able to manipulate mutants. So at this point, when she's revealed it, we understand how Lady Deathstrike is on his side. But I would have loved to have seen, we know that serum only lasts for a certain point in time. I would have loved to have had some kind of scene where she comes to and you kind of see her own personality, because you only really see her when she's under that manipulation and that spell. So I do. Unfortunately, she falls flat because we never actually get to know her.
She does provide us a pretty killer action scene.
Yes, she does. Yes. With before, even in the prison scene, and then especially after the fact when she's got adamantium in her.
Yeah. And guys, we made it an hour without talking about action. So we got to make up for it. This movie, action-packed, and just an awesome stage for some killer action scenes. Cody, I just think there's so much that we can cover here.
Yeah, I think you kind of right off the bat, one of the most iconic scenes from this film is the White House invasion.
The Nightcrawler attack,
obviously, that kind of is a precursor to some of the scenes that we'd see Bryan Singer come back to this series later with the Quicksilver scene in Days of Future Past. Kind of you see some of the seeds of that, but yeah, off the bat you get a really great action scene with Nightcrawler going into the White House. You also get a great scene of the X-Men's mansion being kind of assaulted by Stryker's goons, shall we say, his agents, his human agents and operatives. Really great action scene there. It's very Wolverine focused. Again, that's what was selling tickets at the time. Wolverine on screen, Hugh Jackman. Everyone loved him coming out of X1. He was the breakout star, and that's what people were there to see. They want to see Wolverine. They want to see Wolverine using his claws instead of just kind of having them on his hands and not using them, which has kind of been a critique that people have had throughout the years, especially in the first film. He doesn't use them as much as you do see here, so they wanted to highlight that action scene specifically, give him a big set piece. I'm kind of with you in a way. When I was younger, it was definitely the same way. When I would watch Batman 1989 when I was a child, I would watch the Batman introduction scene, skip through the narrative, go to the next Batman scene, skip Batman scene, roll credits.
I did need to stop to see Joker dancing through the museum, though. That is
right, exactly.
Always.
You gotta get at least one Prince song in. But yeah, as I've grown up, it's you definitely have to have action, but it has to be in the service of a story. For me to be most effective. If you're making just a straight out and out action film, that's fine. But this is not a straight out and out action film. It's a narrative driven story, and I think the set pieces that we get here set up nicely. I think if you had a weakest action, kind of moment from the film, it's probably the jet missile chase. That's probably the weakest, quote unquote. I'm not saying that it is actually weak, but of the list of the action scenes, it would probably be towards most people's kind of bottom of their list. And then you kind of get into the last kind of action pieces. As we go back to Alkali Leak, we get everybody involved. That's another problem again that I have with this film. Again, it's a big ensemble and you have to take pieces off the board. We touched on Magneto's rescue before, not his rescue, but the first time that Xavier and Cyclops go to actually speak with him at the prison, they kind of discover what's going on, and Xavier gets taken off the board. Cyclops also gets taken off the board. He's there in his lovely pea coat and leather uniform. He has to have his uniform on under his coat, of course, because he's not going to be seen again till the third act, and everyone else is wearing their uniforms. So Cyclops has to be in his uniform as well. So that's kind of another piece kind of taken off the board there to stage the big action that happens towards the end of the film.
Yeah. And, Cyclops is nobody's favorite, unless I happen to find one in either of you two. No.
Nope.
I will attribute this quote to my co-host Todd Hill, who said it about Henry Cavill's Superman. James Marsden would have made a great Cyclops. Unfortunately, he was never able to play him. And I mean by that, he was never given the ability to play Cyclops. Cyclops was just, they looked at Cyclops on the page, or maybe even looked at a blurb about Cyclops' character. Let's boil it down. Well, he's kind of abrasive. He's the leader. He's got to be cocky and arrogant. That's all we're going to give Cyclops in these films.
God, they barely give him leader too.
Yeah, exactly. And Cyclops is so much more than that. He is a great character. Has had a lot done with him in the comics and other material over the years, and he does another one of those that kind of suffers for to have a Wolverine centric film and not something that relies on an ensemble. Cyclops is another unfortunate victim of that as well.
I agree. He's kind of furniture in this movie a little bit. And I'm a huge James Marsden fan.
Who isn't?
So I agree. It's really more the writing and what they gave him. It's not him, but he's my husband's favorite character. He doesn't enjoy it in the movies, but as a comic book fan, Cyclops was always his favorite. So he's still to this day heartbroken that Cyclops never really got his day in the sun on screen.
Absolutely. And then you can look at it. Bryan Singer took him from these films and gave him nothing to do, and then took him to Superman Returns in 2006 and also gave him nothing to do.
No, it's like he's not just a pretty face. Like he's a really good actor. Like let him work. Let the man do his thing.
Isn't he Lon in The Notebook?
Yes, which is such a sleeper role. People sleep on that, but he is like Allie made a mistake, if you ask me. We won't. That's for another podcast and another day. But
I could talk
Team
about
Lon,
that as well.
he's a good man. I mean, usually like the other guy, like the current guy, is a huge jerk, but Lon is fantastic. She definitely missed that one. Missed poor choice.
And what movie are we covering tonight, Dustin? We are doing 2001's The Notebook. It is the second half. They're double feature. No, don't apologize.
I could go on and on about that one.
Pick your side.
Yeah, we need to sneak that one in on a dealer's choice or something. So what a great way that your co-host put it is you would have played a great Cyclops. You just didn't get a chance to play him. I think that's so astute about that. We were talking about these action sequences. We have all of these relationships. This is wonderful. Our setting is it's not distant future. It's not distant past. It's just kind of modern. We do have a cell phone, kind of, in this movie.
The world's thinnest cell phone in 2003. Yeah,
like 2 seashells or something like that. It's very confusing.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because that little thing. He doesn't know how to use it. So funny. He's like holding it up like a phone, but it's not working like a phone. And that's where I wanted to get to. This movie's funny.
Yes.
It's not a comedy. It's a movie that is funny. And I think all of our dialogue here is... Now, Logan is a one-liner machine. But I think a lot of our characters do a great job with the dialogue that they're given. So I think credit really needs to go to our writers for... If you have a chance where there's, let's say, 12 important characters, everything that comes out of their mouth, even Storm's, is good. I would say the one that is kind of taxing for me is Jean Grey. Jean Grey's taxing. Lizzy, explain that sigh to me.
I will expand on this later, but I hate her. I really I cannot stand her. It's twofold. I don't like her character, and I really, really dislike the actress as well. Like I hate her in everything she plays. And I'm so sorry for her. Like sorry to this woman. Like I don't have anything personally against you. I hate everything she's in. I really do. I really do. And it's so bad. But I enjoy the movies. Like Taken, a great example. She's in Taken many years later. And I love that movie. But I just she's never been able to hit a home run for me ever. And it's just, we're not meant to be friends, I guess, in that way. And so I find her insufferable to watch. And I so appreciate what they're trying to do to lay down that groundwork of they want the love triangle on one side with Jean Grey. So there's the whole piece with Logan. And, she's like, don't make me do this. Don't make me do this. But then she kind of still gives in. It's like, it just kind of feels a little forced to me. I see the passion on Logan's side and I see the desire. I see none of it on her side. So I'm just kind of having a question mark of like, are you into Logan because he's into you? Or like, what's happening? Because I don't see any attraction on your side. Like Logan is clearly in love with you, but I see absolutely nothing on your side. Like you seem very happy with Scott and you advocate for Scott every single time that Logan steps in. So I'm very confused as to why you're kissing him back and why you're going for this. It just kind of seems like you are bored and want to go for it. That falls flat for me. And then the setting the tone and the text for the Phoenix eventually rising, I just kind of think like I a lot of that is not her fault because as we learn later in the next movie, Charles has kind of blocked a lot of that from her mind. You know, you mentioned it earlier, Cody, like the Phoenix fits.
Yeah.
And but I just think if Scott had said at one point, you were having an issue moving a book and now you have a nightmare and the whole room shakes. She's not really being very forthcoming. And I just think in the world that they've set for each other, I would really expect a little different than that, because they're all kind of learning as they go. Like nobody's an expert in being a mutant. They're all new at it in a lot of ways. So I would think that if she's having these kinds of issues, that she's in the very place to address it, and yet she hides it. And she gets an F for me.
Oh. F for Phoenix Force.
Yes.
Well, in a way, you're right about the love triangle thing. It's almost the only reason that Scott Summers is even in this, is to kind of be, it's an interesting play. By the way, a lot of strong female characters in this movie. Now, we're not going to say that Bryan Singer is some kind of revolutionary here, but in a way, how many times do we have a lead actress, or female actors? How many times do we have a lead actor whose only role is to be like the goal of pursuit or like the hanger-on of our leading man? And in this case, it's the opposite. And we see it and we go, yuck. It makes you wonder about why we aren't saying yuck the other way. But I will say, I think I'm with you with this Famke Janssen here. And it's not because if I'm in a room, I think I'm looking towards Halle Berry. That's unfair. That's not what I'm getting at. The idea is she's almost like, you know how they sometimes say like the city is the third character, the fifth character? Mm-hmm. She almost exists as a force, not a character, as this sort of necessary implement for the direction of the trilogy to go.
That's fair. Yes.
And that's one way that I would look at this potentially. But I do want to spend a little bit of time on our other very strong female character here, Mystique, Cody. I don't remember Mystique being someone that I paid attention to in the animated series, but such a force to be reckoned with in these Bryan Singer movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Portrayed here by Rebecca Romijn. Obviously, she probably had the hardest role in the entire films that she was in terms of the time that she had to spend in makeup every day to come in and perform that role for the amount of screen time she's actually given. So kudos to her for going through all that. Same for Alan Cummings. He did it one time for this movie and never did it again. But yeah, she is a force. She's obviously very loyal to Magneto. We would see her later portrayed in some of the X-Men films as well by Jennifer Lawrence. But yeah, very good. For comic book fans, she also she has ties to Nightcrawler. I think in the early '90s, it was kind of said that she was at that point she was Nightcrawler's mother, and that she had maybe had an affair with Azazel, which Lizzy, Azazel was featured in X-Men First Class. He's our teleporter. Looks very much like Nightcrawler, but red. Later on, I think it was kind of retconned that it was actually Mystique, and I believe it was Destiny was actually the parents of Nightcrawler that it was kind of retconned to. But yeah, absolutely a character that you really need. She kind of takes on the role early in the film. She is basically, since the death of Senator Kelly in the first film, she is now, for all intents and purposes, Senator Kelly, and she has now changed that character into a someone who was anti-mutant into a pro-mutant sympathizer, and is kind of pushing that agenda through Congress and through the Senate in opposition of William Stryker. And they have a kind of couple of scenes early on in the film when they're meeting with the president. But yeah, a kind of a small role, but still a role that fills in narratively, kind of fills in some blanks. She's obviously the way that Eric gets out of prison by injecting our guard with some of the iron that he was missing from his diet.
So cool.
Exactly. She needs to work on her technique with spiking drinks, though, because it took a long time for that guard to actually suffer the effects of it. He had to every last drop of that beer
Right.
before he finally succumbed to the succumbed to it.
I didn't think about that. It's funny.
A small role, but also narratively needed and pretty well executed throughout this film.
A lot of things really well executed. Going back and thinking about it, I had mentioned that I watched this movie and then spent an equal amount of time as the movie lasted reading about X-Men stuff. It's just this happens a lot on the show. Lizzy is we'll talk about a movie for about as long as the movie goes, and then I want to read more. This is a show for people that just want more and more. And I want more, but I want to give more in our superlative section. So are you guys ready with me?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Cody, we're going to start with you. Who's your MVP of X2?
Well, there's really, for me, it's got to be Hugh Jackman as the MVP. I don't think this movie and this franchise would have been successful and had as much longevity as it had without Hugh Jackman bringing it to what he did to that role. And he's obviously the center, the driving force here. It is very much, it's an X-Men film in title, but you could really call it Wolverine dash
And his friends.
X-Men 2, X-Men United. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Wolverine has amazing friends because it is a very Wolverine-centric film. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing, but he's our MVP here for sure.
That's a strong case. Lizzy, who's your MVP?
Sir Ian McKellen. I love him so much.
Yeah.
I just adore him. And in a lot of ways, he drives the entire plot because without the Brotherhood, without Magneto, Stryker's plan probably would have been completely successful. Because Charles Xavier is always kind of in for the betterment of humanity and society. And I think he really needed Magneto because I think that getting through on the other side, they needed to get their hands a little dirty. And I think that Magneto wasn't afraid to go there. And so he makes the movie, but then also he makes it for me just by being so much fun to watch.
Lizzy, I love what you just said. When our leaders of our factions need each other.
Yes.
There's something, I'm almost got a tear in my eye because they do. Professor X and Magneto need each other.
They love each other. Yeah, they really respect each other, and it's fun to watch.
It's so fun to watch. And who made it so fun to watch? I'm going to say Bryan Singer as my MVP. We know his other works. We know that he gets a lot of the credit for this X-Men stuff. I'm willing to give it to him. There's very few decisions that I question. And there are very few things as far as like connection to my childhood nostalgia that I, raise my finger and say, tut, tut, William Stryker's son was not this kind of mutant. And I cannot believe you would include Ben Foster as the angel next movie. None of that stuff matters. I think his versions of this movie are so well done. It's to the level of Peter Jackson and Lord of the Rings to me. Of like, wow, it's like who I equate with enjoyment of this film series is with him. And of course, we are very lucky to have all the actors mentioned. Who is your best supporting actor, Cody?
For me, it's going to be Alan Cummings. First time in the X-Men series, last time in the X-Men series. But I mean, he brings something to the character of Nightcrawler. Interesting character. Develops it in a way. In the comic books, it was added later. He was kind of that devout, kind of orthodox, kind of Christian of the Christian faith, and then that's kind of brought into this. I love the details also of his makeup and effects with the his angelic symbols that he has on his body, almost like kind of a form of scarification. To where he says in the film that each of them represent a sin that he's committed, and it's just a lot more depth than you would expect to that character. He's got one of the most iconic scenes in the entire X-Men franchise with the assault on the White House, and he has some good scenes in development with Halle Berry we kind of talked about before. So for me, my supporting actor kind of goes to Alan Cummings here.
Once again, another strong case. Lizzy, who's your best supporting?
Yes, mine's actually the same, and I think your reasoning was absolutely top notch, perfect. For all of those reasons as well. He's my best supporting.
He's also a fun character in the comic books as well. Like I came in, he was the one I was excited for. He's on the poster. It's in the previews. and me and my buddies are grabbing each other by the shirt. Nightcrawler is going to be in this one. And then you get treated to something that's artistic. I will say it's almost unfair. He was my hidden gem. I'll have to figure something out later. I wanted to give him credit too. My best supporting is Brian Cox as William Stryker. I think Brian Cox and Alan Cumming are the two names that most frequently come up whenever we do movies and we want to insert someone else in them. How do we get Brian Cox or Alan Cumming into this movie? So I love both these guys, and he's got a gravitas to him. The William Stryker character is, in my sort of headcanon, unimpressive to me in the written form, but on screen, Brian Cox gives him such life, and
well said.
It's a lot of credit to him. Cody, who's your hidden gem, or what might be your hidden gem of this movie?
And this, it's more kind of a what? It's the X-Men that aren't on the team, the X-Men like Colossus, like the possible Kitty Pryde. At one point in the scene during in the bar where Mystique is going to kind of spike the drink of our prison guard, we see a little Easter egg of Dr. Hank McCoy mentioned on the bar TV,
That's
which
right.
is if X-Men fans will know as Beast in the X-Men franchise. But for me, the hidden gems are like the small bits we get with Colossus and those other X-Men that I wish had kind of be given a roster spot over some of the others. Those are kind of my hidden gems here.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned like roster spot over the others. I think there is something special in my head about why Pyro matters, is because he's the boss of level 1 of the X-Men's side-scrolling video game. And he's a real hothead, pun intended. What's your hidden gem, Lizzy?
Shawn Ashmore, that plays Bobby, Iceman. I had mentioned it a little earlier when we were on our break, but he was in the show Animorphs, which was a TV adaptation of the book series that I was absolutely obsessed with as a kid. And when we went to the theater when this movie started, and the previews and all the things, knowing that Iceman was going to be in X-Men, again, being about like 15 years old when this movie came out, I didn't care about Hugh Jackman or Ian McKellen, Patrick Stewart, any of these names. None of them meant anything to me. I was just so excited to see Animorphs on screen. So I love, and I still do, I see his face and he'll always be like that kid that can morph into a tiger for me. And so I love seeing Bobby on screen.
Shawn Ashmore, biggest candidate for being on the cover of Tiger Beat.
Right.
But I also think he's had more roles since then. His career didn't end. I think he's on some popular superhero show now. So he's keeping it going.
He's had a good career. I'm happy to, every time I get to see his face. He came back much later for like the Days of Future Past with a bunch of other original cast members, and he's done a great job. I'm always happy to see his face.
So has a very ongoing relationship with the game studio Remedy as well, for fans of video games, and for Remedy as well. Alan Wake 2 and some other games he's been in recently. He has always kind of given a supporting role in their video games for the last several years.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love it when mainstream actors do a good job and commit with that. Rest in peace, Matthew Perry. Matthew Perry was a huge guy with the Fallout games, and he was given roles in that as well. So it's cool to see those worlds mix. Well, I came up with another hidden gem, and I had actually thought about this the moment I saw it in theaters. If you notice, when Mystique is doing our 2003 version of hacking on the computer, going through the folders, that is something that maybe doesn't hold up, is those computer screens. But even still, we get it. She's hacking, she's data mining, whatever. She's going through a list of names, and they're names of other mutants. And the cursor briefly highlights on a Remy Lebeau before moving on to the next one, who, as we all know, is Gambit. One of a lot of little boys' favorite characters, is the cool staff-wielding, throw anything with kinetic energy type of thing. They kind of hint at him in the movie. Turns out they filmed stuff with Gambit for this movie.
No way.
Yes. Now, they end up adding a Gambit-style character in one of the worst X-Men movies later, but to have Gambit fill one of those roster spots for you, Cody, I would have loved that. So just the idea that they include the name at Remy Lebeau, sort of like the Hank McCoy, I love that. All right, best shot, Cody. Best cinematic moment of this movie.
I think it has to go for, you could kind of pick and choose really, but it goes to the shots from the White House attack with Nightcrawler. Those wide cinematic shots, those kind of spin around, kind of a little bit of slow motion, kind of used there. You can really kind of pick and choose from any of those shots, and really interesting kind of shots and camera placement there for some of those early White House attack shots. So that's it for me as far as cinematic moments and shots goes.
Yeah, really well done. Like, you can see him longer than he must physically be there, and it's just really well done, artistic. Lizzy, what's your best shot?
Mine's a little cheesy, but I love when they're at Bobby's house and Wolverine hears the sound and he releases his claws, and there's a still of him he's right in front of the camera with his claws. And to me, that just feels like they had to get that shot. You know, they told themselves, of all the scenes of this entire story, we have to make sure that we get at least one still of Wolverine and those claws. And so they had to do it. And then, of course, you see very quickly afterwards that it's a cat and just trying to lick his little adamantium claw. But I love that because you could just feel the intentionality behind that scene. That was just, they needed it and they got it.
Yeah. I actually chose a Wolverine shot as well. During the storming of Xavier's school, Wolverine and Iceman are in the kitchen. Soldier sneaks up on Iceman. Wolverine jumps him and says, "Oh, you got the wrong house, bub." Before Siren, one of the little girls, her scream goes off and everyone starts holding their ears. Well, right after that, he fights this sort of soldier off and screams at him as he plunges both claws into his chest. Now, if you're watching this with subtitles, it does not say screaming. It says ferocious roaring. Because if you listen back to that and the same attitude that he has when he's jumping off of the balcony onto the other two, Wolverine kills people, y'all. He kills people. Doesn't suffer fools. Kills them in front of kids. Thank God they did not try to PG that up. It's like, oh, I'm going to knock him down. He kills people. And so you see it and it scares Iceman. That moment that he's got him pinned against the refrigerator, that's my best shot. And that's we're falling all about the place in the theater. Like, look at that. And then you get more of it in that scene. So I thought that shot was incredible.
He's hiding under the table, Iceman. He's just right. Very afraid.
He said, "You okay?" And he just nods his head.
All
right, what is your best scene, Cody?
I'm going to give it to one of our ending scenes. I'm gonna call it Gene's sacrifice, but it's mostly between Scott and Logan over her death. We hear Hugh Jackman's Logan kind of repeating over and over, she's gone, and Cyclops, just that emotional outburst of, no, don't you say that. That kind of emotional impact for me. It's just in these early superhero films and in this film, you don't give these great actors a lot of time to really act and emote on screen, and that was an example in this film of two actors kind of chewing the scenery a little bit, getting to really act and getting into kind of some emotional stuff with some emotional weight. So I give it to that kind of sacrifice, but the reaction, Scott and Logan's reaction to Gene's sacrifice.
Somebody's working double duty because he's not able to emote with his eyes. So that's an incredible choice. Lizzy, what's your best scene?
I didn't even think about that. That's an awesome point. My best scene is the prison break scene. I just think it is so awesome. And I love watching it now. Something that flew right over my head was, as a kid, that I caught up now in this particular watch, is when Mystique injects the police guard. At the time I'm like, I wonder what she's giving him. And then, you kind of watch it, still kind of not necessarily knowing exactly what she's putting inside of him. And then the second that he's like, something's different about you. I can smell it. Like you've got the too much iron in your blood. And then it clicks of what she put inside of him. And he collects makes a little ball out of all of his iron. I just think it's so cool and so much fun to watch. And you just get to see Ian McKellen just have fun. And you can tell in that particular scene that Magneto is having a good time. He's been a caged animal this entire time. he's like, never mess with a woman. And I love it so much. It's so great. And then he just manipulates the little ball into a disc that he just glides off on.
With the two rotating, orbiting around him.
Yes, it's so fun.
That's my choice as well. So good call, Lizzy. It's my choice as well. There's something, that scene starts off with when Officer Florio, or whatever his name is, walks in. You get a close-up on him in bed, and you see him smiling because he knows, he can sense it, he can feel it. Oh, it happens.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love it.
Okay, this is a tough one here. Who are you recasting from this movie?
Oh yeah, we've already kind of touched on it. This one was easy for me. This one immediately I give to Halle Berry here. Again, don't want to come across as I don't like Halle Berry. She's great in a lot of films and a great actress, as we kind of covered. But she was just never the casting that I would have looked for a Storm. She doesn't kind of bring that energy that Lizzy was kind of mentioning. Storm as a character, she kind of grew up on the streets without her parents. Very fierce character, very strong willed. One of the core leaders of the X-Men team, in the comic books, and here in the third film, they kind of force her into that role, and it felt very forced. In The Last Stand, kind of forcing her into that leadership role because, again, James Marsden went off to shoot Superman Returns, so you had to Logan wasn't developed yet into your leader, so, we got to give it to Storm, but she wasn't in those film series. Halle Berry hadn't brought enough to that character to kind of earn that position within that team. So for me, it's Halle Berry that's kind of the easy choice of recasting here.
They do something fun with her hair in all three movies, and this one is the best version of her hair. Wrong superlative section. I just wanted to bring it up while we're talking about Halle Berry. Lizzy, who's your recast?
Jean Grey. I just don't like that actress. I think perhaps if it was someone else, I maybe could have enjoyed it. Again, I think that I'm just so bored when I watch her, and I think, and I'm so sorry to that actress. I know I'm just dogging on you, and I'm very sorry, but I would replace her with Nicole Kidman. I think that Nicole Kidman does a epic job with bringing passion into the roles that she plays, and I think that kind of, I want this so badly, but I know that it's not good for me kind of emotion that I want her to feel with Logan. I think Nicole Kidman could really bring that to the table and probably also bring some color to the just kind of Phoenix fits that you were talking about earlier, Cody, as well. I just think she could have brought so much more depth to that character.
Yeah, both of you already knew someone you would want to recast. I had my choice from the jump right away. Anna Paquin has never been my rogue, ever. The X-Men 1 was pretty rogue central, and I didn't see it. I didn't feel it. I think this actor, Anna Paquin, ends up doing. Tell me, is it True Blood? Do either of you know True Blood?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
yes,
I loved that.
Is she very good in that show?
Yes, I think so.
That's what I've heard. Right? I didn't watch it. I had a girl I lived with for a while watched it. And that happens in New Orleans or like in the Bayou, right?
Yeah, in like the swamps of Louisiana. Yeah.
Does she have like a Southern accent in the show?
She does. Yeah.
So where is it in this movie?
Yeah, she does. Yeah, and it's really good. It's very believable. But I agree. I love Anna Paquin in True Blood. I'm a huge True Blood fan. I'm not a huge Rogue fan with her either. She doesn't do it for me.
Well, I mean, I guess, credit to Lorraine, whoever the original voice actor was, but Rogue has such an incredible Louisiana voice, or kind of the honey shug voice, and they try to give it to her in like X-Men 3. And it's just such a mess. But I was like, who on earth could I put in there? Was like Christina Ricci would have been fun.
She would have been, yeah.
Kristen Bell would have been 20 years old, might work. Then I said, what would be perfect? Holly Hunter. She was born 20 years later. Holly Hunter was born in 1985. She would have been an incredible Rogue.
Yeah, as a young girl, she would have hit it out of the park for sure.
I'm in hypothetical world.
Yes,
but that's okay. So let's move on to a couple of our last ones. Cody, what's your best wardrobe or makeup moment of X2?
All right. So before I give you my moment here, I need to touch on this because I didn't get to in our discussion. So my moment is makeup related as far as the superlative, but the wardrobe in the films and the X-Men 1 and X2 and the rest of the franchise as you kind of go forward, just the dullest wardrobe decisions you could ever make for these characters. No color whatsoever. Lizzy, you were talking about you recently watched First Class before we were started the pod here. Very colorful. Those
Yes.
classic X-Men kind of uniforms. Here, it's just everybody in tight leather, and it doesn't work for me. So, wanted to make that note about the wardrobe. It's been criticized through the years to death, I know, but for me, as far as the wardrobe and makeup, it's got to go to Alan Cumming's Nightcrawler makeup. I
Yeah.
mean, for the amount of time he was in the chair and the look of that makeup, not only do you get it just, face and hands in the early scenes, there's the scene in the church where Jean is kind of inspecting his back and looking at treating his wound that he has from being, shot during the White House invasion, but also looking at, again, what we talked about, that kind of scarification, those angelic symbols across his body. So just the amount of time and work and the look and the aesthetic of it all, I think works really, really well there. So for me, it's got to be the makeup used for Alan Cummings.
And great comment about, it's almost as if they tried to matrix our characters. They tried to make our bright colored characters just so flat. And I guess I kind of get it for 2000 or for 99, 2000 and 2003. I kind of get it. But
oh yeah,
we understand some of the appeal of our characters. That's why, some of these Avengers movies do such a great job keeping things pretty accurate. What is your best wardrobe or makeup moment, Lizzy?
I like Wolverine's hair. Aaron and I got into a debate as we were watching it because he was criticizing his hair, being like, why is his hair like that? It looks ridiculous. Like they're giving him horns. I was like, well, that was what it looked like in the comics. Like that was his hair. And he was like, are you sure that wasn't a hat or something that he had on? I'm like, no, that was his haircut. Like that, they're really honoring like Wolverine in the comics and in the cartoons with that crazy hairdo. And he Googled it and he was like, okay, yeah, you're right. So I liked that because seeing the hair, it made me excited because it just was like, okay, we're gonna like, this is it. Wolverine is stepped into his skin and we're here. And so I enjoyed the hair.
To be fair,
yeah, it was pretty funny. We had a good laugh about the hair.
It does get a little higher, a little bit more twisty. It's got a very Ace Ventura When Nature Calls vibe.
Yes, like double duty. Yes, it's very
exactly.
It's like yes.
God. Aaron is so funny, but he said, "Was it a hat?"
He's like, "What was like a helmet or something?"
Like a Sherlock Holmes style hat that only goes towards the middle and the rest of it sticks up. Oh, or a fez. But yeah, Wolverine wears a fez most of the time. He takes it off and his hair looks like that. That's so funny. For me, there were a lot of choices here. I went with more like a special effect here, which is when Kelly Hugh's character, Lady Deathstrike, gets stuck with the adamantium and she gets injected with it, the molten metal. Then it starts to she loses the color in her eyes because the only moment that she's no longer under the mind control is when she's expiring. So you get 2 seconds, 3 seconds of her looking at Logan, the only other person like her in the entire world. And then you get her sort of crying this adamantium. And I thought it wasn't just cool, it was also artistic. And followed up by a very satisfying thud in the water because she's so heavy. That was smart. All right.
Then there's another character that you could kind of get a little bit more narrative thrust out of. That the Wolverine and Lady Deathstrike, former lovers in the comic books. If she's working with Stryker, why not bring that in and have some scenes between them? This to kind of add to that weight of their fight, and kind of like we used to be this, and then Lady, I don't know who you are, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Just give that a little bit more narrative thrust between those characters.
Yeah, what a gold mine of content, this world. All right, a couple left here. Change one thing about this movie, Cody.
I'm gonna change the script to be more reliant on our ensemble and steer away from the Wolverine-centric story. The best X-Men stories to me are the ones that include the whole team. There are some great solo standalones, don't get me wrong, but X-Men 1 was Rogue heavy, but it was also Wolverine heavy too. It was kind of a dual kind of story. Rogue was definitely very much featured there, but it was very also driven by the the kind of twist in that film is you think it's a Wolverine story. You think Magneto wants Wolverine for his plans, but he really wants Rogue in the end for his plans. But for me, you got to kind of cut down on the ensemble a little bit. If you have too many characters and you can't do them justice, cut down on them, kind of bring some of it out and shift your focus and guide your story towards more of, if you're going to have Wolverine, then don't have the rest of the characters in there as much and suffer for it, and there is some good writers for this. Michael Dougherty, he went on to do some great things and direct, Godzilla King of the Monsters, Trick or Treat, Krampus, which we recently talked about on my
I
podcast.
saw
So
that.
like it's he's done some good things. David Hayter as well, Solid Snake, voice actor, good writer in his own regard. But I think you just got to bring the ensemble, scale it down a little bit, and get it away from Wolverine centric. But I understand why it was done back then in 2003. Again, you got to sell tickets, and people love Wolverine.
Lizzy, what is your change one thing?
So I don't know if this is actually possible within her abilities, but this was my kind of thought to like foreshadow a little bit more for the next movie. But I would have thought it would have been interesting because I know that they try to make a lot of parallels between what Jean is capable of doing versus what Charles is capable of doing. Like they almost make it seem like she's capable of everything that he's capable of. The only main difference is in their self-control abilities. And so if that's true, I would have liked, instead of the mind manipulation with Cerebro, I would have appreciated if maybe that was done through Jean rather than through Jason. I thought that maybe that would have been a little interesting to see. And maybe that would, when Charles comes to be able to see that she's capable of using Cerebro in that way and has the capabilities to do all of that, if perhaps like that was something that unlocks the Phoenix for her. Because there isn't really like a grand moment that unlocks the Phoenix. It's like her death. And then when she arises, she's just fully functioning now. But it would have been kind of interesting if there was just this big epic moment that just unlocked her full capabilities and then, leads to the events of the third movie. You almost don't even need to have her die in order to make that happen, but it would have been a cooler way for her to become the Phoenix. I think the death and then the I'm back, it just kind of feels like a little like
too much on the nose, like a Phoenix.
Yeah, exactly. It was a little bit of a cop out. So I think that would be my change one thing.
And another thing is for her to be upset at being mind controlled. That would be a great way to release that.
Yes, absolutely.
So the one thing I really wanted to say was Gambit was in this movie and they cut it. Give me Gambit. Right. I had something prepared about our henchwomen not having a bunch to do, but honestly, this movie does a great job with our female leads, mostly for the most part. So let's get Gambit in here. Best quote, Cody.
We kind of actually hit it earlier when we were talking about Pyro, but I'm going to give my best quote. It's a Magneto quote. He tells Pyro, "You are a god among insects. Never let anyone tell you different."
Yeah, great influencing, manipulating, just like, hey, I believe in you too. Like that, it's pretty cool, especially for us Magneto chicas. Lizzy, what's your best quote?
So in the church when Storm and Nightcrawler are talking, and they're sharing their stories of kind of how they got to be here, and Nightcrawler asks Halle Berry, asks Storm, I should say, like, how does that make you feel? She's like, it makes me feel angry. And she says, sometimes anger can help you survive. And he follows back up with, so can faith. And I just think it's such a wise quote. You could kind of pluck that out of this movie and use that really in almost any kind of movie, really in any type of genre. It's just such a wise comeback to motivating, having faith be your motivation rather than anger.
Yeah. Well, and he's also like, he's not some saint and he's not perfect, because that's the one thing he doesn't have about things he can't see. He needs to learn his own, he needs to learn his own lesson to get into the Cerebro 2 later on. So yeah, great option. Mine actually has to do with Pyro and Magneto as well, which is, the Iceman, Rogue, and Pyro are sitting there in the Quinjet waiting. And Pyro gets up and he says, "That's it. I'm sick of this kids' table beep. I'm going in there." And Rogue says, "They told us to stay here." And he looks back and says, "You always do what you're told." And what I like about this is that it's not him choosing evil. It's about him choosing himself. That is pretty neat to be able to say, all these mutants are different. It's not just good guys, bad guys. They have different things they feel. This guy just says, "I like the way this guy does his thing. I tried going to school. High school dropouts aren't failures. They figure out their own way." And so he's just going to figure out his own way. And he walks in. It's actually kind of poignant. He walks into the cold and immediately starts shivering. Like, oh, it's hard alone. It's tough out here.
Yeah.
But then he goes, and he is a strong mutant. And a cool, just little scene there. Before we get to our ratings and how we recommend this movie, Cody, I want to give you one additional opportunity to tell us a little bit more about Towel Capes.
Yeah, for sure. So, Towel Capes, we cover film, television, comics, and games. You were talking about before kind of our inspiration, the idea that the superhero genre is what is the idea and the genesis of our podcast. We say that we were inspired by every child who has wrapped a towel around their shoulders and dreamed of being a superhero. And there's a famous photo that I have of me and my uncle, who's my co-host, doing just that when I was a very small child and he was a much younger man as well. But I mean, we really dig into the superhero genre, but we kind of do a little bit of what you guys do. We go all around pop culture. We're not just superhero films. Like I said, we recently covered Krampus. We did Aquaman this week. We covered Violent Night as well. Like we like to go kind of all over the gamut of pop culture, and I think that's the big thing. And as we go forward into 2024, we started this year. We're looking to kind of do some more things, cover some comic books some more, do a little bit more on the gaming side, bring some other guests on as well. But yeah, we're really trying to we're finding our voice, and we're seeing some good growth, and we're having a good time doing it. And that's what I told my uncle when we started this. Just if it ever becomes like work or a second job for us, that's when we know it's time to quit. And so far, so good on that end. But yeah, I think it's something that it might be worth your time if you check it out. We really try to strive to kind of give some good content, give you something good to listen to, and hopefully we're doing that.
Nice.
Yeah, we've been a great guest on our show, so thank you for sharing that. Give us, here on the Roundtable, we rate movies from 0.5 to 5 stars. 5 is our max, 0.5 is our worst. Half-star increments. How do you rate X2?
So for me, coming back to this, like I said, when I was a child, this was probably in the early days when there wasn't as many superhero films. I was 13 years old when I saw this in the cinema, and probably back then for me it was a 9 or a 10. The excitement for the X-Men, the excitement for comic book movies had never kind of been higher. We had some of the bad days coming into the Schumacher Batman films and some of the lesser Superman sequels, and comic books were on a downturn. And that late '90s period of Blade and Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, X-Men, X-Men 2,
The Punisher
kind of changed all those things. Yeah, the early Marvel Punisher, Thomas Jane Punisher as well, 2004. Those things kind of changed, and it kind of led to comic books being where it is today, for better or for worse. But for me, it's still a film. It still holds up. There are problems with it that I have. It isn't an 8 or 9 for me back as it was back then. Based on the scale that we're using here today, I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. I think it's a really solid film. I think it kind of fits in there. It still holds up to this day. There's still a lot to kind of mine from it, and a lot of good fun to have. And there's still some good character moments, even though it is a little bit overstuffed at points.
Overstuffed, but not so much as to take up multiple plates, because it's still just right around, I think, 2 hours 5, 2 hours 10, and so it has not reached the 3 hour mark yet that some of these movies are nowadays, which listeners know
Absolutely.
will cause me to be not so pleasant. Lizzy, what is your rating of X2?
So for me, I'm going to be generous with this movie and give it a 5-star rating. I love watching this movie for the main reason that I will rewatch this movie probably often now that I've revisited it as an adult and I know that I like it. This is something that I will dive back into probably soon. And that's the biggest thing for me with my rating system. There are scenes in this movie that I dislike, and there's scenes that fall flat or feel forced that I have talked about. But there's far more good scenes, and the good scenes are superb. And I just have so much fun watching this movie. And I think in terms of a superhero movie, it really has a little bit of everything. I feel like that's kind of a cliche selling point that you give somebody when you're trying to get them to watch a movie. But it truly does have a little bit of everything. And it is just, it's fresh still. Like watching it 20 plus years later, like I have just as much fun. And I adore it.
It is fresh. It's a 4.5 fresh for me. I thought I was being generous with my 4.5. When I mentioned all the stuff it does have them. And the fun that it has is fun. And the dialogue is incredible. And our characters are fun. And it's okay that Jean Grey is a drag. And it's okay that Storm isn't really utilized the most. Lizzy, you and I were chatting earlier today, and you said you watched X-Men, X2, X-Men 3, The Last Stand, and Days of Future Past in what? What would you say, 4 days? 5?
Something like, I mean, it's kind of like crazy that how quickly we didn't watch any Christmas movies this past week. We watched X-Men. Like I literally have an Instagram story that I'm wrapping presents to an X-Men movie, and I'm like, keeping it festive over here. Like,
yeah. I did X2 and then immediately watched X-Men 3, and I was like, wow, X2 really nailed it because X3 doesn't.
No, yeah, agreed.
So with X2, I'm going 4.5, and I think it's generous. And I would say like it would be this movie and Spider-Man 2 of our early 2000s area, like Cody, we were just kind of talking about. Those are two of the finest sequels that I've ever seen in my life.
Great.
And I'm not a sequel guy, as our listeners will know. So like there's something special about these. And so the only reason I would maybe give Spider-Man 2 any head above this at all is our music, which is in this movie didn't stand out to me, but exists and gives you the feeling that you want. And it's so this is about the highest recommendation I can give to a superhero movie. But I need some options to choose for next time.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Dustin, you say you're not a sequel guy, but you've got to grin and bear it for one more week because we are going to do another sequel. So buckle up. Option 1, we have got 1999's Toy Story 2. When Woody is stolen by a toy collector, Buzz and his friends set out on a rescue mission to save Woody before he becomes a museum toy property with his Roundup gang, Jesse, Prospector, and Bullseye. Option 2, The Hunger Games Catching Fire from 2013. Katniss Everdeen and Peeta Mellark become targets of the Capitol again after their victory in the 74th Hunger Games and sparks a rebellion in the districts of Panem. Option 3, 1991's Terminator 2, T2 Judgment Day. A cyborg identical to the one who failed to kill Sarah Connor is now set out to protect her 10 years later, the old son of John, from an even more advanced and powerful cyborg.
The gold standard, the gold medal, the paragon of sequels. Terminator 2 Judgment Day. There is no
T2. Yeah, it's got to be T2. I mean, if we're talking about successful sequels, I don't think you can even have that conversation without talking about Terminator 2. I feel like it's wrong. T2 belongs on the best sequel list.
Need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle. I don't know if I'm going to be on this episode, but I can't believe I'm the one that gets to choose it because, it's so great. You have anything to say about Terminator 2, Cody?
Oh yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you guys in that discussion of like, the sequels that you could argue are better than the original. You have the short list is Terminator 2, Empire Strikes Back. Those are your the big two that people are going to come to easily. I love, another sequel that people kind of debate as well, Aliens from James Cameron, another James Cameron film. Some people love Aliens more than the original Alien. So there's kind of your short list there, but fantastic film.
Yeah.
That's something I hope that we can cover for our podcast one day in the future as well.
If anything, it's a perfect excuse to watch Aliens again. We covered it last year. It's so good. Another one
The
up there.
best.
I know I'm not a sequel guy. I think Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls is better than the original.
Ooh, I agree with that. I really, really, really agree with that. 100%. I actually don't like the first one, but I love the second one where like he's in the wilderness and yes. I like that one.
This is weird. I feel myself changing. My general attitude is I'm not a sequel guy. We're talking about all the best sequels of all time. I think you can only count them on one hand. The best sequels, the ones that are really, really worth it.
We could definitely have a specialty show where we talk about sequels. That would be really fun.
I am sick that day. Well, thank you, Cody. And thank you, all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pandora, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give us a like on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at movie_retro. Email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. Producing and providing this podcast is fun, but not free. We invite you to support the show at our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/retromovieroundtable. Any contribution is much appreciated and will go towards making the show better for you, the listeners. As always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Lizzy?
The secret impresses no one. The trick you use it for is everything.